Hello YouTube, this is Satsu5 and I'm going to do kind of some recommended books. Let me see if I can find my spot. Um, First off, Against Heresies by Irenaeus, book 1 through 3, unabridged. I'm glad I read it or listened to it, but it was kind of difficult because they make a lot of references to people. They use certain words in different languages and religions and stuff. That's hard to understand if you're not from that time period. And so it was very interesting, but the average person probably won't enjoy it. I wasn't a big fan of Bondage of the Will by Martin Luther, but I am a fan of Martin Luther. Fox's Book of Murders. This specific edition is cool. It's unabridged because it has the original Fox's Books of Murders, which starts from the beginning of Christianity to the Reformation. But this edition has stories from the 21st century. And because of this book specifically, when I look at the catalog for donating, a Samaritan's Purse has a Christmas catalog, and in this catalog it has different ministries you can donate to. Because of this book, every time I read about persecuted Christians, I tear up. So that's a pretty impactful book. Tales of the Perilous Realm. I didn't quite enjoy the content, but I love the cover that Alan Lee drew. That's Alan Lee's artwork on the cover. But I did like a specific story in there, Farmer Giles and the Dragon. That was probably my favorite story in that book, but the rest of them I wasn't too big of a fan of. Person of Interest. That's J. Warner Wallace. He's a ex-cold case detective, and he's a very, I don't want to say famous, but well-known cold case detective. He's been on Cold Case Files on TV several times. He's a very, if you're going to say a cold case detective is famous, he would be it. And in Person of Interest, he talks about the influence of Jesus on almost every aspect of life, as far as, science and the scientific revolution, and how the scientific revolution was kicked off and inspired by Christianity and Jesus. He talks about art, for his paintings, music, poetry, books, and when he says music, not just the old hymns and stuff, but he's talking about like Biggie Smalls and stuff. So I think it was Biggie. I think it was Notorious. But he talks about, in a lot of modern music, is influenced by Jesus, even if they're not too flattering to Jesus. And one of my favorite chapters is when he talks about how religions other than Christianity was influenced by Jesus. So there's religions that predate Christianity who updated or modified the old beliefs to be influenced by Jesus, like in Hinduism and Greek religion. Like Hercules was not always a virtuous moral standard or moral hero. He was not a good guy, and he was just like his father Zeus. He was a player, and then after Jesus, he became virtuous and a better moral. He had a better moral compass, and he basically died and ascended to heaven like Jesus, kind of. Instead of being crucified, he was burnt on a pyre, and then he ascended to heaven. And then, there's many other religions that modified their beliefs that predate Christianity, and there was a group of religions that post-date Christianity that adopted Jesus. Islam would be a example of that, and the Ahmadiyya Islamic is a sect of Islam that did it, and there was the Bohai, what's his name, the Krishna religion. So very interesting. Cold Case Christianity, a homicide detective investigates claims of the Bible. This is really cool because he is a cold case detective, and this is basically his story of how he heard that Jesus was the smartest man and the best man that ever lived, and people like really hyped up Jesus, and actually a preacher did, and this cold case detective / very sarcastic atheist was like, all right, I'm going to read the Bible, and I'm going to read it like how a eyewitness would, like if I'm investigating an eyewitness, and I'm going to see if they are eyewitness testimony or if they're not eyewitness testimony. He's going to investigate it, whether it's actual eyewitness testimony or not, and then he's going to come up with a conclusion. So love that book. And A Bottle of Rum, History of the New World in 10 Cocktails. Have to read that every year. And by the way, I read Person of Interest in Cold Case Christianity every year. And I actually read one of these twice this year. The Silmarillion I read twice this year, but I also have it by two different narrators, and I prefer Andy Serkis to this one. The Silmarillion is kind of described as the Bible of Middle Earth or the Lord of the Rings universe. It has creation myth, it has the Elder Days, it has the First Age, and in the Silmarillion you have Beren and Luthien, Children of Húrin, and Fall of Gondolin, and those are all in the Silmarillion, but you got an expanded, unabridged version in these separate books. So Beren and Luthien, that is heavily referenced in Lord of the Rings. Children of Húrin is unfortunately not referenced in the other books, but it's a pretty important story. And then Fall of Gondolin is referenced in The Hobbit. That's where Sting, Orcrist, and Glamdring came from. Legolas Greenleaf was at the Fall of Gondolin. And so Beren and Luthien, a mortal man falls in love with an immortal elf. It's a lot like Arwen and Aragorn. And actually, it's funny, Arwen and Aragorn are actually ancestors of Beren and Luthien. So they're actually like cousins. So, that's kind of funny. But all of Beren and Luthien, Children of Húrin, and Fall of Gondolin are stories of the First Age. And then in Silmarillion, you also have Akalabaith, which is the story of the fall of Numenor. And then you also have Rings of Power that talks about the Second Age and the forging of the rings and stuff. Unfinished Tales is another audiobook by J.R.R. Tolkien and Christopher Tolkien. And it has just that, Unfinished Tales, the evolution of certain characters like Galadriel. There's a story in there that I don't like. It's Ardinian and Edoras, or Aldarion and Edoras. And I don't care for that story. And Galadriel in Unfinished Tales is pretty lengthy, but it's pretty interesting how J.R.R. Tolkien was constantly crafting Galadriel, who is like possibly one of the strongest elves. I'm not going to say she's stronger than Glorfindel, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Glorfindel, but she's pretty awesome. Fall of Numenor also has the story of Aldarion and Edoras, but and I don't like that story. It's just kind of to me, but apparently Tolkien thought it was pretty good, important. But the Fall of Numenor is a cool book because it's all about the island of Numenor, and is the evolution of Numenor, why Tolkien created Numenor, and what was his inspiration and for Numenor. And it talks about like the wildlife, the environment in Numenor, and the politics. Really interesting book. I read the Silmarillion, Beren and Luthien, Children of Húrin, and Fall of Gondolin at least once a year. Not always Unfinished Tales, but sometimes. And Fall of Numenor I haven't had long enough to read more than twice. I have read it twice. Mere Christianity is a good book by C.S. Lewis. I wish they came up with a different name than Mere Christianity. It's a good book, but he's trying to list out the basic beliefs of Christianity, and basically you just have the gospel. That would be the basic beliefs of Christianity. But Mere Christianity has like the moral argument and some other things that he articulates very well, and I read that multiple times a year. I read Tactics at least twice a year. That's a book on Christian apologetics and how to talk to people and how to argue with people and not be a jerk, and just really respect the other person who you're talking to, even if they're being belligerent, and how to navigate conversations. Good book, really good book. Seeking God and Finding Jesus by Nabil Qureshi. I read that probably once or twice a year. And the first 5 times I read that book, I cried. No joke. Nabil Qureshi is a Christian apologist. He's an ex-Muslim. And this is his story of living as a Muslim and then coming into contact with a competent Christian apologist who became his best friend, and them arguing with each other over a span of years, and him finally converting to Christianity. It's a good story of how long-term Christian apologetics works, and it's just a good story. I highly recommend it. And then C.S. Lewis, I have 2 other books from his theological line of books, Screwtape Letters and Great Divorce. Screwtape Letters is about a demon mentor who mentors this younger demon to influence this young man on Earth, and it doesn't work, and it's just an interesting story. And then Great Divorce is about these people in hell who get on a bus and take a vacation to purgatory, and these I'm going to say hellions, they're lost souls. When they get to purgatory, it's very painful to walk on the grass, and like leaves weigh as much as an anvil, and it's a very hostile environment for them. And they're confronted with friends who died and went to heaven, and they try to convince them to go over the mountains and go to heaven with them. And a lot of them have a lot of hang-ups, like, a child that died young, and different sins like lust that's keeping them from, well, actually, I'm going to get back on that, but, there's people who try to work their way to heaven, and they won't just accept the free gift, and there's people who are obsessed with their beauty and all this stuff, and there's a woman who lost a child young, and she's obsessed with the child, but she doesn't truly love Jesus, and she's like, hey, I don't care, about God, send my child with me so I can go home. And she's meaning like she'd rather live in hell with her son than, accept Jesus, because God took the child at a young age, for lack of a better term. And they explain all these people and their problems that keep them from going over the mountains. And the one person who actually really succeeds and embraces God is a guy who suffers with lust. And he actually recants or repents from his lustful desires, and he actually ends up going to heaven. So it's an interesting story. But it's a lot of very interesting stuff, a very good fictional story. No God But One, Seek Allah or Jesus. This is by Nabil Qureshi, and this is a book, like if Seeking Allah Finding Jesus is the heart of Nabil Qureshi's story, No God But One is the mind of Nabil Qureshi's story. They're going over the specific arguments comparing Jesus and Allah, and this is it's entertaining, but it's slightly more academic, and not academic in a like necessarily in a vocabulary sense, but they go over a lot of history and comparisons between the two deities, and then it's pretty good. The Destruction of Jerusalem, excerpts from Josephus. That's very interesting. This is my first year reading it, and it's basically abridged from Josephus, and when in the Gospels, when Jesus talks about I forget what it's called, but it causes desolation. I can't believe I forgot this, but I can't look it up at the moment. This is actually predicted in the Bible, and then when it happens, in I think it's 70 AD. So Jesus died around 30-something AD, and 70 AD, the destruction of Jerusalem happens. And, you read in the Gospels when Josephus says, or not Josephus, when Jesus says that the temple won't have a single stone standing on the other, and you think to yourself, how is a temple going to be completely broken apart? Well, actually what happens is the Romans find gold leaf in the temple, and they break apart they burn the temple. Then all the gold kind of melts in the crevices of the stones, so they rip apart the stones to retrieve the gold. So that's pretty interesting. I liked Arabian Nights. The Fisherman and the Jinn, I've heard about that story in the past, and I never read it, and I finally read it, and to me, the unabridged version didn't satisfy. Alibaba and the 40 Thieves was very good, really enjoyed it, and I would recommend that story. Has nothing to do with Aladdin. Robinson Crusoe is good. A little adventure story. H.P. Lovecraft Complete Fiction Omnibus Collection. There was basically two stories in H.P. Lovecraft's book that I liked, and one of those is The Call of Cthulhu, or Cthulhu, and I can't remember the other one. The other one was like the first one, but after that, it was just really hard to listen to. I really didn't enjoy it, so I stopped. Obviously, I listen to Lord of the Rings, the whole trilogy, at least once a year. I mean, I've read it multiple times in a year, at least 3 times in 1 year once, including the appendices. But I do read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit at least once a year, along with the Silmarillion and all those books. Let's see. I'm getting close to the end. Dominion was interesting. It's basically economist talks about the history of Christianity and the Western world, and how a lot of rights and beliefs that even very liberal atheists hold take for granted that they come from Christianity. So even if they completely disagree with Jesus, the beliefs that they hold really dear came from Christianity. And some people might not like this, but like liberalism, like Christianity was very liberal back then. Like it was, they changed a lot of things. There was a lot of progress and progression. And basically, the problem with liberalism isn't that it's liberal, but it's liberal that's divorced from Christianity or divorced from Jesus. So, like, for example, like gay rights, we normally want to consider gay rights and Christianity to come from the same root, but this thought of marrying a loved one for your whole life and being faithful to them and till death do you part is a Christian belief that didn't really exist outside of Judeo-Christian values. And then like you have gays who are like, no, I want to do this, but that belief comes from Christianity, not necessarily the other religions. And so the thing with Dominion is very interesting how they talk about how a lot of the liberal movement steals from and takes for granted a lot of Christian ideals that they divorce from Jesus. But this book has a lot of interesting rough language. I don't think he was a Christian when he. I don't think Tom Holland was a Christian when he wrote this book, but he eventually, I think, converted to Christianity. But in this book, it actually has some pretty rough language in it for a Christian book. and the Case for series from Lee Strobel. The Case for Christ is good, and I really like Case for Christ. And I have read Case for a Creator. I don't know why it says it's new, because I have read it this year. So if it would have counted that book for me, I probably would have 35 books instead of 34 books this year. But I have finished that book this year. And Case for the Creator is, without a doubt, one of my favorite Christian apologetics books. Basically, this guy interviews about an evolutionary biologist and cosmologist and astronomers and philosophers. And they talk about how Earth has no right to be here out of luck. There's like, the universe is so opposed to life, and Darwinism cannot account for X, Y, and Z, like the Cambrian explosion and the origin of life. And like the Big Bang is the current model, but like even if there was I'm not doubting the Big Bang, but even with the Big Bang, it doesn't account for life on Earth in the universe. And those things that happen, like there was the universal constants, and like used to, it was like you have to have Earth, planet with water, X amount of miles away from the sun with a moon, and then like they had to keep adding to it and adding to it and adding to it. So it was like 10 billion to the 10th power is the chances of Earth existing with life on it. And that's the closest number I can come to my head, but that's not an exaggeration. So this book is mostly trying to prove intelligent design, and I think it does an awesome job of it. If you're an atheist and you want to hear about how much the cards are stacked against you with life being present in the universe, not only this galaxy but in the universe, and how slim the chances are that not just human life, but how slim the chances are for bacterial life that to even exist. And not only that, what's interesting is that also Earth is unique, that we can observe spatial or planetary bodies. Like there's a lot of planets where if you get on it, you can't actually observe planetary movements. So it's a really interesting book, and I actually like Case for the Creator more than Case for Christ. They're both good though, and they interview a lot of intelligent, very smart people who are experts in their fields, have doctorates, and some of them do believe in a type of evolution, theistic evolution. Some of them are cosmologists, and it's a good book. Arabian Nights Aladdin is interesting. It's really different from the movie, and although it has some crossover, but it's really different from the movie. And FYI, Aladdin is Chinese. He is not Arabic, so that's also fun. I listen to the NIV Bible. I finish that at least once a year, sometimes twice a year. And Darwin's Doubt is Stephen C. Meyer. He was in Case for a Creator, and he talked about the Cambrian explosion, how you have these certain type of fossils that are very basic, almost sponge-like, and then just out of nowhere you have all these fossils of things that have no ancestor, and they just appear from nowhere, and they just explode with a great force out of nowhere. And this was actually one of Darwin's doubts. He said, we don't have any fossils or these ancestors to these fossils, but he says, but someday they will find the fossils that predate or that lead up to these fossils, and they never did. So that was a interesting book. The only thing about this Darwin's Doubt book is very, 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 very academic. Like you barely have the prerequisites if you have a high school biology background. Like this book in my opinion, is written for scholars. I can understand a little bit of it, but there's a lot of it is like, wow, I wish I would have studied biology in college. But you will be able to grasp the majority of it, but then there's a lot of stuff that you might not grasp. But nonetheless, it's very interesting. I just don't know if I'll read it every year. But I thought it deserved a shout out. So, far as my ebooks, I read that book. It's an ebook on how to bind physical books. And I plan on doing some book binding, and that was a good book. I've read it about 3 times. And then the rest of the books that I read is in this category: marksmanship, shooters. Let's see, it's Gun Digest, I think. Let me go to the cover so I can read the title. Gun Digest, Shooter's Guide to Handgun Marksmanship. I read that. I read Masad Al-Dup, Combat Shooting, and that inspired me to get interested in competition shooting. And then I'm still reading Jeff Cooper's book on fighting handguns. Haven't finished it yet. It says 69% complete. These other 3 books, Walther pistols, Colt 1911 pistol, and Soviet pistols, I've read those cover to cover. I have a very early Walther PPK that predates the swastika being put on them, and it's cool because it's from like 1936. And it's a very well-made handgun, very reliable. It's just a 32 ACP, which sucks, but it's a really good pistol. And I thought, well, I'll buy the Walther book. And in all honesty, I wasn't as impressed with the Walther book as much as I was with the Soviet pistol book. And then the 1911 book was probably a second best, in this series as far as the gun books. So if I had to rate them, I'd go Soviet pistols, 1911 pistols, and Walther pistols is my rating for that. And I think I reviewed the Colt 1911 pistol. The others I haven't reviewed. But those are, I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books, ebooks. And that's the video. Hope you enjoy it. I'm a Satsu 5, and I'm out.